Here's something most people don't know about The Godfather. The novel that became the most iconic mob story ever told was written by a guy who had never once met a real mafioso, not a single one. Chapter 1, The Hook, A Desperate Man's Book. Mario Puzo was a government clerk with 5 kids and over $20,000 in gambling debt. He'd already written 2 novels that got great reviews and made almost no money. So he decided to write something that would sell. Something pulpy, something commercial, something that would appeal to the masses. His own words, he told Larry King his principal motivation was simply to make money, and it worked. The Godfather spent 67 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. 9 million copies sold in 2 years. It was a sensation. But here's the thing nobody talks about. The book is kind of a mess. Not the core story. The Corleone family saga is brilliant no matter what form it takes, but wrapped around that saga is hundreds of pages of subplots that range from bizarre to borderline unreadable. Entire chapters about a singer's throat surgery, 50 pages about a woman's gynecological issues, Hollywood backstabbing that has nothing to do with the main plot. The book was a massive bestseller, but it wasn't a masterpiece. Not yet. That took someone else entirely. A broke 30-year-old filmmaker named Francis Ford Coppola, who didn't even want the job, and nearly got fired from it. This is the story of how the movie didn't just adapt The Godfather, it rescued it. Chapter 2, The Director Who Said No. When Paramount came knocking in 1969, Coppola's first instinct was to pass. He later said the novel was more commercial and salacious than my own taste. He was an artist. He'd studied theater at Hofstra, made a few small indie films, and was working out of San Francisco, as far from Hollywood as you could get while still being in the business. His production company, American Zoetrope, was circling the drain. His partner at the time was a young filmmaker named George Lucas, and Lucas made the practical case. They were broke. Without a major payday, they'd be evicted. So Coppola read the book again, and on that second pass, something clicked. Underneath all the pulp, he saw what he later described as a metaphor for American capitalism in the tale of a great king with 3 sons. That's the line that changed everything. Not a mob story, not a crime thriller. A Shakespearean tragedy about power, loyalty, and the corruption of the American dream. But seeing that vision and executing it were 2 very different things. To organize his thoughts, Coppola borrowed a technique from his theater training, the prompt book. He took a copy of Puzo's novel, cut it apart page by page, and pasted the pages into a massive 3-ring binder. Then he went to Cafe Trieste in San Francisco's North Beach neighborhood, sat in the corner with his yellow Olivetti typewriter, and started annotating. Color-coded notes in the margins, observations about what each scene was really about, what to cut, what to keep, what to elevate. 720 pages of meticulous preparation, driven by what Coppola later admitted was profound fear. He wasn't wrong to be afraid. Paramount hated almost every decision he made. Chapter 3, The Surgery. What Coppola Cut. This is where the movie became the movie, because the single most important thing Coppola did wasn't what he added, it was what he removed. Start with Johnny Fontane. In the film, he's a minor character. He shows up at the wedding, asks Don Corleone for help getting a movie role, and that request sets up the legendary horsehead scene. That's basically it. But in the novel, Fontane is practically a co-lead. Puzo gives us chapter after chapter of his Hollywood life. His failing singing voice, a subplot about vocal cord surgery, his past marriages, his estrangement from the Corleone family, his friendships with producers and actresses. It goes on, and it has almost zero impact on the story of the Corleones. It's filler dressed up as world building. Coppola saw that immediately. He stripped Fontane down to his narrative function, a demonstration of Don Corleone's reach and power. Nothing more. Then there's Lucy Mancini. If you've only seen the film, you might not even remember her name. She's the bridesmaid Sonny takes upstairs during the wedding. 10 seconds of screen time, maybe. In the novel, she occupies over 50 pages. Puzo devotes entire chapters to her personal life after Sonny's death, including, and I wish I was exaggerating, a lengthy subplot about a medical condition that prevented her from being satisfied by any man other than Sonny, and the corrective surgery she undergoes to fix it. This is real. This is in the book. Coppola cut all of it, every single page. And in doing so, he didn't lose a thing the story needed. There's also the novel's treatment of Jack Woltz, the Hollywood producer who receives the horse head. In the book, we learn that Woltz was involved in far darker crimes against children. Puzo spells it out explicitly. Coppola removed this entirely, and the result is actually more effective. In the film, the horse head scene lands as a terrifying display of power. In the book, it reads more like rough justice. The film version is scarier precisely because it feels disproportionate. You understand the Corleones will destroy anything in their path, not because the target deserves it, but because someone dared to say no. Every one of these cuts follows the same logic. Coppola wasn't trimming for time. He was stripping away everything that diluted the central tragedy. The book sprawled, the film focused, and that focus is what turned a pulpy bestseller into art. Chapter 4, The Elevation, What Coppola Changed. Cutting was only half the work. The other half was transformation, taking scenes that existed in the novel and making them mean more. The baptism sequence is the clearest example. In the novel, Michael's revenge killings happen separately at different points in the story. They're effective, but they're just plot beats, things that happen in sequence. And in the book, Michael only orders the deaths of 2 of the rival family heads, not all of them. Mo Green gets killed earlier in the timeline. There's no single moment where it all converges. Coppola saw an opportunity that Puzo didn't. He took those scattered killings and compressed them into one scene, the baptism montage. Michael stands in a church, holding his infant niece, played, by the way, by Coppola's own daughter, Sophia, renouncing Satan and all his works, while simultaneously his men are executing every rival he has. The priest asks if he rejects evil, and Michael says he does, and the camera cuts to a man getting shot through the eye. Think about what that single editorial decision accomplished. It turned a straightforward revenge plot into a statement about the nature of power and hypocrisy. It gave the audience the visual thesis of the entire film in 5 minutes. Michael isn't just becoming the new Don. He's becoming a godfather in 2 senses at once, to his niece and to an empire of violence. The novel tells you this happened. The film makes you feel it in your bones. Then there's the handling of Michael's transformation overall. In the book, Michael's shift from war hero to mob boss is gradual and somewhat mechanical. You understand his reasons, but it reads like a career change. Coppola reframed it as a tragedy. He made Michael sympathetic at the start, the college-educated veteran who wants nothing to do with the family business, and then showed, scene by scene, the moral compromises that pull him under. By the time Kay asks him if he killed Carlo, and he lies to her face, the audience doesn't just know Michael has changed. They feel the loss of who he used to be. And that final image, the door closing on Kay's face, shutting her out of Michael's world forever, that's not in the novel. That's Coppola. That single shot is arguably the most devastating ending in American cinema. And it exists because a young director understood something the novelist didn't, that the most powerful stories aren't about what happens, they're about what's lost. Chapter 5. The War Behind the Camera. None of this happened easily. The story of The Godfather's production is almost as dramatic as the film itself. Paramount fought Coppola on nearly every front. They wanted the film set in the 1970s, contemporary, cheap, and easy. They suggested shooting in Kansas City or St. Louis to save on location costs. Coppola fought for a 1940s period piece shot in New York. That decision alone multiplied the budget, and the studio was furious. Then there was casting. Paramount didn't want Marlon Brando. He was considered washed up, difficult to work with, box office poison. Coppola wanted him from the beginning. They also hated the idea of Al Pacino, who was virtually unknown. The studio wanted a bigger name. Coppola refused to budge on either. He paid for that stubbornness. Throughout production, Paramount threatened to replace him. Coppola had nightmares about being fired and replaced by Elia Kazan. At one point, he had to quell what amounted to a crew mutiny, firing his film editor and 5 other crew members who were working against him. He suffered through what he called the downs and downs of production. And here's the detail that makes all of this land. The night of the Academy Awards, as The Godfather was sweeping the ceremony, Coppola was watching the broadcast in New York with his friend Martin Scorsese. And Scorsese turned to him and said something along the lines of, "How are they going to fire you now?" Because even on Oscar night, everyone knew how close it had come to never happening. That prompt book. The 700-page annotated Bible Coppola created out of fear was his lifeline through all of it. Every time the studio pushed back, every time someone questioned his vision, he could point to those pages and show exactly why every decision mattered. The fear that drove him to over-prepare is the same fear that made the film great. Chapter 6, The Legacy. Why the cut is the craft. So here's the real point of all of this. The Godfather novel and the Godfather film tell essentially the same story. The plot is the same. Most of the dialogue is the same. Puzo even co-wrote the screenplay. But they are fundamentally different works of art, and the gap between them comes down to one thing: editing. Not film editing, editorial vision. The ability to look at a sprawling, messy, addictive bestseller and see the leaner, more powerful story hiding inside it. Puzo wrote a great yarn. He gave us the Corleones, the structure, the world. Without his novel, there is no film. But Coppola did something Puzo either couldn't or didn't want to do. He imposed restraint. He cut the subplots that diluted the emotional core. He restructured the revenge arc into a single devastating sequence. He darkened the lighting, slowed the pacing, and trusted the audience to sit with silence and shadow instead of exposition. The result is a film that doesn't just adapt the book, it argues with it. The novel says, "Here's everything about this world." The film says, "Here's the one thing about this world that matters." And what matters is the tragedy of Michael Corleone, a man who gained an empire and lost his soul. One more thing. Coppola held improvisational rehearsal sessions before filming started. He sat the entire cast down at a table, in character, and had them eat a meal together as the Corleone family. Nobody could break character. It wasn't scripted. It was just the actors living inside the family dynamic until it became real. And that's exactly what you feel when you watch the movie. These people aren't performing. They're existing inside a world that a desperate novelist built to pay his debts, and that a terrified young director rebuilt into something that will outlast both of them. If you want to understand why The Godfather endures, don't look at what's in the film. Look at what was taken out. The masterpiece was always there, buried under the pulp. Coppola just knew where to cut. If this changed how you think about the film, hit subscribe. Drop a comment telling me what other adaptation you think improved on its source material. I'm genuinely curious, and I'll see you in the next one.